Hey, my name's Nick, and behind me here is this lovely Barge-Toon. It's a pontoon. We don't really know what it is, but it is a pontoon boat. It used to have a 50-horse Mariner on it, but with COVID, the boat sat for probably two and a half years. And as most of you know, old outboard engines that sit that long, they run into issues. So there was a lot to fix on it. So we're gonna do a walkthrough and show you guys everything that we did, modifications and corrections that we made to this vessel. Like I mentioned before, this used to have a 50-horse Mariner on it. We went and upgraded it to a 115 Suzuki. It can actually handle quite a bit more horsepower than that. The reason I'm holding this paddle is I wanted to give you guys a visualization of how the trim worked on the 50 Mariner. So when it originally was backed into the shop, I was confused staring at it for a bit because I was trying to figure out why there was a paddle wedged between the engine bracket and the engine. And that's what they used to trim the old motor up, because I couldn't pull the paddle out and I couldn't trim the motor. So I ended up taking a die grinder and cutting it out. And then once we dropped the motor down, it was bleeding all the trim fluid on the floor. Now it's got this 115 Suzuki outboard on this Barge-Toon, and it should be good to go for a while. So anytime we do a repower here at the shop, one of the key things we look at is the fuel system. 9 times out of 10, from the tank to the motor, we're replacing it. So up here, we've put a new fuel water separator in here. We also put a new vent hose, put a new fuel fill hose, we've put a new pickup tube, a new anti-siphon valve, all new fuel line to the engine. We actually siphoned the old gas out. We're not gonna run old gas through this fuel system to a brand new engine. So siphoned all the gas out, cleaned everything up in here, put new fuel in it, and then we test ran everything with the new fuel in. A lot of the times you'll run into shops where they'll throw a new motor on a boat and not even look at the old fuel system, and then they have issues with the brand new motor and they can't figure out why. Well, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be because there's an issue with the pickup tube or fuel line or vent or bad gas. So it's always good. It's not terribly expensive to go through and do that. So just go ahead and replace it all. Another thing we did for this Barge-Toon is he had a washdown pump set up on here that really, I don't see how it worked or if it ever worked. So we just gutted that, essentially, put a new pickup, ran new all water line, a little filter right here, the washdown pump, and then the spigots on the other side. So he has, you know, essentially accessible water for, you know, hosing down the Barge-Toon. This was kind of the biggest thing that we made the change on with this vessel. It had, I don't know the best, been Frankenstein-ed together is the best way to put it. It had pieces and parts off of another pontoon that they made work. I'd say kind of made work. There's a few gauges that didn't even function, but needless to say, we ripped all of it out, ripped all the wiring out of this boat. Originally, when Tim told me about this job, he was like, well, we'll go ahead and start de-rigging it. And I said, well, just hold on a second. Let me, you know, trace some wires and figure out what's going on with it. He said, no, you don't understand. Once you see this boat, you're gonna just wanna gut it. And sure enough, once I saw it, I said, yeah, we're just gonna start from scratch. We're gonna rip everything out and rewire everything. That's what we did. Tim had made a custom dash for this. We ended up putting a wedge in here essentially to help angle the throttle. We put all new functioning Suzuki gauges in. We put a troll mode switch in here as well, which this is a sweet little feature that you can get with your Suzuki motors. And basically once you are in gear, you just hold the down button on this. It activates the troll mode, and then you can actually adjust the RPMs in 50 RPM increments, so that, you know, if you're trolling at 700 RPM, you could just hit this up arrow when it's activated, and then you go to 750, hit it again, you go to 800. So you can actually do fine-tune adjustments with your RPMs while underway. We put a nice little 4-position Blue Sea switch panel in here. We put some USB charging, because when you're out in the middle of nowhere, if you got to charge your cell phone or have a spotlight, whatever, we've got that available. Put a little horn in here. New steering, we went with a U-Flex steering system, new steering wheel. It was a start from scratch, which are some of the best jobs in my opinion to do, because you're not working with something that's already been cobbled together or existing. Just rip it out and start from scratch. So another thing you might notice that we did is this gray paint. It's actually barrier coat, it's epoxy. We went through and epoxied all the wood on the helm. We just want to try to protect the helm as much as possible with having all these upgrades and modifications to it. Anytime you're laying a two-part epoxy onto a surface, if there's any like single part paint on there, you want to try to get off as much of it as possible. We attempted that, but what will happen is there's a chemical reaction that will actually lift that single part paint underneath the two-part epoxy, and you'll start to have issues with bubbling and, you know, discoloration. It's not going to stay. You're going to have to scrape it all off, and that's what we ended up doing. We ran into that issue. We weren't able to get enough of the paint up. Once we laid the barrier coat down, we waited 24 hours, and sure enough, you know, it started bubbling up and coming up. So I spent a good portion of yesterday scraping it all off, sanding it all down, and then we redid it and it turned out perfect. Another cool feature that the customer brought to us to add on is the transducer mount. A lot of the times on pontoons, they have these spots right here. There's one on this pontoon and there's one on the other pontoon where you can actually mount a transducer if you wanted to. For this particular boat, the Barge-Toon, we did not want to mount them here. As you can see, this is already bent up and banged up, but he had somebody come through and weld 1/4-inch steel plates on the pontoons, and so that they can essentially just run it up onto the rocks. With that being said, you don't want to mount a transducer if they're going to be beating up the pontoons that bad, because there's a possibility your $500 transducer gets snapped right off and you're done. So he brought us this sweet transducer mount that you can actually pull this pin here and you can just drop it down and it locks into place. You can adjust the height of it need be, depending on, you know, what depth you're in for water. But just another sweet little feature that we added on just to help preserve the electronics on the boat. All right, so the last thing we really need to do for this boat is throw a prop on it. So what you'll need to do is get you a prop wrench, probably need some gloves. A product that we use is Evinrude Johnson BRP triple guard grease. So you can grease the prop shaft. You will need a prop hub and a propeller, and then some needle nose pliers for the cotter pin. We also use a piece of 4x4 wood just to wedge the prop in place so that you can tighten it without it moving. So with the Barge-Toon we have here, taking it for its first sea trial, we wanted to check wide open throttle position all the way down, and at its top speed we reached a shocking speed of actually 25 miles an hour. We thought it was only going to do probably about 20, but she scoots. The RPM range was dead nuts at 6,000 RPMs, which was perfect. The motor ran great, sounded great. With the cable shifting and throttle, it functioned flawlessly. The adjustments were perfect. At the end of the day, this boat's ready to go back to the customer, and hopefully he'll be happy with it. Well, thank you guys for joining us on this magical journey of the Barge-Toon. If you guys have any specialty work that needs done or fun projects, you can reach us at our information below. And if you found this video interesting, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.